people ask me how I got started in this business. I thought that my fear of speaking to groups was a singular deficiency. When it came to speaking to more than 3 or 4 people, I just fell apart. When I was 30 years old, I had a whole change of life. I realized that the one way to tackle your fears was to just jump in head first. 2 times before I was set to go on, I had my bag packed and I walked out of the hotel hailing down a cab. Here I was going out and speaking to groups of 300-400 people at a time. All I remember is the rivulets of sweat just pouring down my face. The third day I said something came to me, it was sarcastic, and a bunch of people laughed. This isn't so bad. And by the end of the week, I was totally hooked. Once you have a taste of it and you realize that it's a good thing, it's something that you need to have. You need to get your fix over and over again.
Without any further delay, Doug Jefferys.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening. My name is Doug Jefferys, and I want to welcome you all to this 90-minute program on enhancing your presentation skills that we call Nail It. And I also want to warn you that after today, you're never going to be able to look at another presenter or be able to sit through another presentation in quite the same way. You're going to learn what it takes to actually make it work when you get up here and speak. And you're going to thus develop a very critical eye every time you see somebody get up here on the stage. You're going to notice whether they're doing it right or whether they're doing it wrong. You will know what 99% of business presenters don't know, and that is how to create effective knowledge transfer. And that's a good thing, because going forward, when you have to get up and give presentations, this sensitivity will be something that will be in the back of your mind all the time. You'll be asking yourself, am I doing it according to the rules or not? And with that sensitivity, you will be thinking about every time you get up here and do it. And the great thing about presentation skills is once you know what to do, once you know how to do it correctly, every single time you have the opportunity to get up and speak, you get a little bit better. The net effect is going to be that you're going to have audiences following you as they never have before. The very first time you put these techniques you're going to learn here today into effect, you're going to see an entirely different response from your audience. Presentation skills are a lifelong skill-building endeavor. And the more opportunities you have to speak, if you start out the right way, the more opportunities you have to get a little bit better. We're going to show you here tonight that most of the behaviors that people engage in when they get up in front of the room tend to be counterproductive both for them as a presenter and counterproductive for the audience. Most of the way that people do speak come from behaviors that we've been practicing since a very early age.
We say that 99% of all presenters engage in the same behaviors. And the reality is those are behaviors that we were taught. Most was taught from a young age. And our reaction to those behaviors, our negative reactions, have been building up and building up. And it's because we've engaged in certain actions. Again, the great thing about this program is we don't ask people to change their belief systems. We don't say, well, when you get up there, you got to feel this way. We tell you it's simple. Do this, your body and the audience will respond like this.
Some of you might be familiar with this list. This actually comes from the Book of Lists, 1977. But when humans are asked what's the thing they're most afraid of? Since they've been asking this question, actually speaking before a group always filters to the top. It is humans' number one fear.
Interesting thing with this list here, you look at speaking to a group at 41%, and down here death at 19%. Seinfeld famously said of this list, it suggests that at a funeral, the person giving the eulogy
would rather be in the box. But it's true, there are good reasons why people actually feel this fear when they get up to speak in front of groups. When I say they feel this fear, what I'm talking about is the emotions that run through you are a function of the chemicals that are running through you, and the chemicals that are running through you when you find yourself up in front of a group are the exact same chemicals that are coursing through your veins when the front tire on your minivan blows out at 70 miles an hour on the expressway. It's the exact same response. And so when we find ourselves speaking and we have these feelings inside, we equate it as fear. And like a lot of things that require three elements, it requires all three. If you only do 2 out of 3, you don't quite make it. First thing is you have to have something to say. But more than having something to say, you need to have something to say that is of meaning to your audience. Your presentation has to contain worthwhile enough content that has enough in it for your audience members to get them to sit through it. When I say in it for that, you always have to be thinking when you put together a presentation. You always have to be asking yourself. In fact, actually what you have to do is you have to get off the stage and get back at the audience, look up at the screen and ask yourself, if I were a person of the audience, is there really something in it for me? Because unfortunately, the old WIIFM, what's in it for me, is the only thing that audiences are ever listening to. And anything you put into your presentation that does not relate to the audience, that does not give them a benefit or benefit they perceive, they're not going to be tuned in. So you have to have content. Then what you have to do is you have to put it together. You have to put this content together into a design, a format that actually allows every member of the audience to follow your arguments every step of the way. If we're talking about PowerPoint, which is pretty ubiquitous in corporate America today, if we're talking about PowerPoint, your design has to allow for a flow of information in such a way that every member of the audience, every individual member of the audience is on the same page and on the same wavelength as you every step of the way. Now, the interesting thing is that if you have something worth saying and you're able to put it together in a proper design, then the last part here, delivery, the part that gives most people the most anxiety, actually isn't all that difficult. A lot of people have a hard time believing that, but what you're going to see is an entirely new approach to putting together presentations and delivering them to your audience so that you end up actually not having to do a whole lot of work. In fact, this is what we do all week long, is we have classes where we show people that, okay, first of all, you have to learn some of the rules of what you do when you're up in front of a group, how you address people, what you do with your body, what you do with your voice and your eyes, but none of that really counts for anything unless you can deliver a presentation that is designed to allow you to do it properly. So again, all three, like going out to a fancy restaurant. You've got to have food, it's got to have service, it's got to have atmosphere, and if you're missing any one of the three, you're missing a great experience. Presentations work the same way. First rule is this: if you're working too hard, you're doing it wrong. Most of the things that people do, most of the behaviors in which they engage when they're up here on the stage, involve trying to do way too many things at one time. And it's the attempt to manage all these different things at one time that help to fuel the anxiety people feel. We're going to show you that the way to do it right is to figure out how to work much more simply than what you're used to. Most of the problems people have when they speak come from the fact that they're trying to do way too many things at once. They try to keep track of way too many variables. They try to, they have too many things going on in their head at one time. They're working too hard, and if you're working too hard, you're doing it wrong. In fact, obviously everybody knows that today we live in a very multitasking environment, right? We're expected to do all sorts of things at the same time. The greatest thing about speaking, when you speak before a group, is if you're doing it right, you learn how to do what I guess man did at one time in his history. It's called unitasking. Unitasking, it's a word, I don't know if it's in the dictionary, but unitasking. It means doing one thing at a time, and that's the beautiful thing about it. I often tell people I hardly think I'm ever working when I'm speaking, because it's one of the easiest things I can do. I never have more than one thing that I'm thinking about at one time, and we'll see how this works. The second rule is that when you do it right, it's always a win-win for both you and the audience. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing at any given time, the speaker wins, the speaker gets benefits, and the audience gets benefits at the same time. It's always a back and forth. Finally, the third rule is probably the most difficult one for people to actually engage in practice. But it's probably the most important too. And that is this. People only start listening when you stop talking. See, most people think that getting up in front of a group is all about opening their mouth and impressing the audience with the breadth and depth of their knowledge. And that usually means a continuous stream of words that come from the presenter's mouth. The problem, as you'll see, is when people do that, audiences don't have a chance to really listen. All of the best speakers out there, people you consider to be great speakers, know this rule, that people only start to listen to you once you stop talking. And if you think about that, just think about some of the best jokes you've ever heard. Think about a comedian who delivers a joke. Some of the ones that are really funny are the ones that it takes you a second or two after the punchline's delivered, before your brain can process what was really said, as opposed to what you thought it was going to be. And when you hear that, wow, that's funny, start to laugh. People only start to listen after you stop talking. All right, first thing we want to do, though, is we want to have some fun. And I don't know if anybody warned you about this. Anybody suggest that this event might have a participatory part to it? You kind of figured this bit. One of the great things about training is most of the time you can just come in, sit down in a seat, nice darkened auditorium, kind of cruise back. Nobody really knows who you are because you're part of a big group, and you can just kind of, put forth as much energy into picking up what's going on as you want to. We need 6 people who are willing to just come up and simply tell us their name, tell us what they do for a living, and tell us why they hate speaking in public. How's that? We'll ask you to speak for maybe, 20 seconds. Sir, please. Thank you. We got two. Yes, sir? Yes, sir? Do we have anybody of, yes, the female persuasion? Great. 6 people
1, 2,
whose
3,
mamas
4. You just kind of line up here. I'll ask you to
right?
stand by the podium.
1, 2, 3. Come on, we need 2 more. 2 more people. Sir, please.
Yeah. We'll just get you out of the spotlight.
And we got 5 people. That's good enough.
We got 5.
No, I say, without further ado, step right
Hello,
up.
everyone. My name is Kathleen Otto, and I work in a really exciting field of the life sciences.
I have a Shockley business, and I also teach health and wellness for Immaculata University.
Area. I have been working for a
My name is Christy Terpstra, and I'm from the South Central. I live outside of Houston, and I'm an ASC.
I'm a director for a software quality assurance company based in Plymouth Meeting. The reason I'm here is because I do realize that public
Round of
speaking...
applause to all these people who did what you wouldn't all do, which is come down here. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. What I want you to do, as we go through these, try to count the number of seconds that anybody here maintains eye contact in any one spot. Okay, let's try this. 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2, 1 and 1, 1 and 1 and 1. Okay, very good. All right, 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 2 and 1 and can't see, but are you starting to see a pattern here? You starting to see a pattern in how long most people maintain eye contact when speaking to groups. 1 and, well, thank you very much, all of you who contributed. Give yourselves a hand. Go. What can we say? What do we see here as far as eyes? What would you say about eye contact? With hands, okay. Hands, it was kind of difficult to tell what they were doing with their hands because, of course, at a podium, as soon as your hands touch the podium, 10,000 volts, right? It's difficult. And standing, of course, the same. How about their pace at which they spoke, the speed? Pretty good? We weren't bored, weren't waiting for the next word? Volume and inflection, we were all able to hear. Well, you got mic'd up, so it's a lot easier. That's cheating. And any ums and ahs? Do we hear ums and ahs? Yeah. A few. Eye contact is the one thing that, as you'll see, is probably the most critical to getting your point across. The trouble with eye contact is that for most of us, at some point, you probably got this bit of advice. Anybody hear this before? Look at everyone in the group. So we were told that that's a good thing, that you want to look at everybody in the group. The problem is that nobody ever told us exactly how to do that. And so as a result, what we see every single time we do this is a phenomenon that we call aerosol eyes.
And it kind of looks like this. Speaker's up in front of the room, and that's what people do. They get up, and knowing that it's a good thing to look at everyone in the audience, they tend to spray the audience with their vision. Well, sometimes when we speak, we tend to look down the whole time like this, hoping there's notes on the podium or the floor. Sometimes when we speak, we look up like this, hoping we'll find divine inspiration. But for the most part, people tend to do just this. Spray the audience with their vision. Never holding eye contact for more than a second at a time. And you understand that that causes a few problems.
When you're in a situation in front of a group like this, what your brain instantly knows is, uh-oh, I got a problem. The problem is there's only one of me and there's a whole bunch of them. It's a classic case of one against many. And every time the brain determines that it's in a situation where there's one against many, the fight or flight sequence kicks in.
And when that happens, the center of our brain called the hypothalamus, which is geared into the optic nerve and to the olfactory senses, it's always monitoring our hearing. It's monitoring the entire environment. In fact, the hypothalamus actually regulates all functions of the body, but one of the functions it regulates is how equipped the body is to deal with things like threats. And so when it finds itself threatened, what it does is sends a bunch of hormones down the pituitary gland at the base of your skull, and then the pituitary sends a bunch of hormones down to the adrenal glands, right up here above your kidneys. And what do you suppose the adrenal glands kick out? Right, adrenaline. And here's what adrenaline does. First thing it does is it gets your heart beating a lot faster. Second thing it does is it increases the force of your heart constrictions, the thump, 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 because it's trying to pump as much as it can. So faster beating heart, beating more, squeezing harder. So the whole idea here is to try to get as much blood flow to both the muscles, ones that can help you fight or flee, and also to those parts of the brain that control those muscles, the motor sections of the brain. The unfortunate part there is, where do you suppose it gets that blood from? Oh, that's right, those other parts like the cerebral cortex, places where you think. It drains it from there to get to the motor sections. And then finally, adrenaline ups your metabolism so that it can help metabolize glucose. It gets glucose in your blood sugar, turns to glycogen, the form that the cells can use, because it's trying to get as much energy as possible. Right? When it does that, when it metabolizes, when it raises your metabolism, it raises your body temperature, you tend to sweat a little bit. It's also a very dehydrative process, so you might end up finding your throat a little bit dry. Then the last thing the adrenals do, most times the hormones are always associated with anti-hormones. There's noradrenaline kicked out too. Noradrenaline is a vasoconstrictive. It's designed to get your blood pressure up. When your blood pressure's up, you sometimes feel that in terms of a flushness in your face.
Anybody feel any of those symptoms when they speak? Yeah, interesting. Yes. And that's exactly what the body is doing, what it's supposed to do. It's recognizing this threat. Now, the really interesting thing about this, though, is, has anybody ever felt those symptoms? Well, let me ask the people who are up here, who are kind enough to sacrifice themselves for you. Did you feel any of those symptoms before you started talking, even, knowing that your turn was coming? Isn't that weird? And you find that sometimes when you're, and the rest of you, like you're at a meeting or something, and somebody says, let's just, we don't all know each other, so let's just get up and tell us a little bit about yourself, and it's coming around, and you start to feel the thump thump. You know what I mean? Well, isn't that strange? I mean, it makes sense that when you're faced with a physical threat, that this would kick in, but why does it happen even before the body senses that? Understand, every time the brain calls on the system to send out this adrenaline, to start this whole process, not only does it do that, but again, because its job is to keep you alive, what it does is it forms what's known as a fear memory. Every time the processes start, files away a little thing called a fear memory. And the purpose of the fear memory is to give you a head start. So the first time you're walking through the savannah, you come around a turn, there's a saber-toothed tiger, jumps out in front of you. You go, and run away. The next time you're walking through the savannah, your brain hears the rustle of the leaves that it remembers happened just before the saber-toothed tiger jumped out last time. And because of this fear memory that was created, it starts the process even before you're presented with a stimuli. The fear memory gives you a head start and keeps you alive. If we could look into the eyes of a speaker, if we could see what it looks like to be from here looking at an audience, and of course we have this technology at Public Speaking Skills, we keep track of the anxiety over on the left-hand side here, and over on the right-hand side we're counting the number of seconds that the speaker's vision is ever held in any one spot. And if you look through the viewfinder here, this is exactly what a speaker sees. Every time it looks around, what it's doing, every time it sees a new image, it's picking up the color of your clothes, the look in your eyes, the hunch of your shoulders, the countenance. It's trying to decide, is this person going to jump across their seat, come out and try to kill me, eat me? Do I have to? And pretty soon, every time it does that, pretty soon, again, we get into this visual overstimulation. We just get too much. Every single time we move, your brain unfortunately takes in everything we see and is constantly doing this threat calculation. What's the problem here? Well, first of all, we have a problem in the fact that when you get up here and speak and do the RSLI thing, you send a message to audiences. In fact, most business presenters have trained audiences to feel that it's okay to step back once from the whole presentation process. I mean, if I were to get up here and say, hi, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Doug Jefferys, and I want to thank you all for coming here tonight. And for the next 85 minutes or so, what you'll notice is I will never look any one of you directly in the eye. In fact, to me, you're not even really people. You're just this one big amorphous blob. And that's what we do. We give audiences permission that it's okay to feel this lack of connection because they can't possibly feel connected when there's never any real meaningful contact. The other thing is that when people get up and speak and they start engaging in behaviors that pump up the anxiety, the audience never sees the speaker, never sees quite the level of an anxiety that the speaker might herself feel, but it still emanates to some degree. Anything that you do which projects a concept of nervousness, lack of comfort on your part, does exactly the wrong thing you want when you're trying to impart people with new information. You're all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which applies to societies, really. But it's the same basic principle, is that, unfortunately, reality is that for every one of you out here, the most important thing on your mind are your basic comforts. And you know this to be true, right? Sitting in the audience, if you're cold, if you're hot, you're thinking about that. If the program's been going on too long and you're hungry or you're thirsty, you're thinking about that. If your bladder's full, that's number one priority. Number one priority is, when is this going to be over so I can hit the restroom, correct? And that's what happens. So anything you do to make an audience feel uncomfortable gets them thinking about something other than your program. And if you want to achieve true knowledge transfer, which is what a presentation is supposed to be all about, again, you, the speaker, and every individual in the audience have to be on the same page, on the same wavelength every step of the way. You can't give them any reason to be thinking of things other than your message. In Western civilization, what do we typically connect with looking people in the eye? What message does it send when we look people in the eye? Trust. Yes, thank you. Tell them the truth. Tell them the truth. Veracity. You can be believed. As well as the opposite, when you look away, you send a message that you're not telling the truth. When you can't hold eye contact with somebody while you're trying to tell them that you got the greatest product in the world, or, no, Your Honor, I wasn't anywhere near there that night. When you look at somebody and you expect them to, and you want them to tell you the truth, you expect them to look in your eye. Tom, did you take that last cookie from the cookie jar? We associate eye contact with telling the truth, with the possible exception of presidents of the United States. It's very difficult for humans to just look someone in the eye, I did not, and lie. And lie. We don't do it very well. We associate eye contact with telling the truth, and we associate looking away with not telling the truth, right? Besides the fact that it all runs up against rule number one, which is if you're working too hard, you're doing it wrong. Which is you're thinking about what you're going to say next. In fact, for most speakers, the most important thing on their mind, their number one thing on their mind, is the next thing they're going to say. So they're always thinking about that next thing they're going to say. And in order to do that, we've got to stack up thoughts. You've got to stack up like 6, 8, 10 thoughts at once in this queue, so then as the words come out of your mouth, you got the next one to come down. Then you couple that with the fact that now you figure out, how am I going to distribute all this? So again, we're creating thoughts up here, and we have the words coming out, and then we listen to the words coming out of our mouths like this. We're like automatic peasants, right? So then we try to spend on, and now we're distributing all. That's doing too many things. Solution we call lock, talk, and pause. Lock, talk, and pause.
And it looks like this. Instead of aerosol eyes, it involves the speaker actually engaging individuals in the audience. It actually involves the speaker having eye contact with individuals in the audience as he or she delivers the thoughts that she wants to say. It involves locking eyes with one person. You're never talking to a group of people. You're only ever talking to people in a group. Okay? You're never talking to a group of individuals. You're always speaking to the individuals in the group. So when you're speaking, you need to give your speech as a series of one-on-one conversations, talking to one person at a time. A series of one-on-one conversations.
Then, as we mentioned before, probably the most difficult thing that people can learn to do, though, is once they've completed that thought to that one person, is to pause before they move on to the next. It's all about the pause. The pause is what we mean when we say that people only start listening to you once you stop talking.
And if we don't engage in behaviors such as talking to one person at a time, such as forgetting the fact that there are 200 people out here, because it really doesn't matter how many people there are. When you're doing it right, you're only speaking to one person at a time. People ask me, what's the greatest number of people you've ever delivered to? And I say, one. Because that's what I do. I'm never speaking to more than one person at a time. And what I'm doing is I'm delivering what I have to say to one person, finishing my thought, and then again, the hardest part, I'm pausing. I'm pausing before turning to the next person and giving the next person my thought.
So, when you're doing it right, it looks a little bit more like this. First thing you want to know, by the way, whenever you get up to speak to a group of people, before you get out of your seat and come up here, pick out the person with whom you're going to begin speaking.
Otherwise, you're going to get in to start looking around for those friendly faces. You ever told that one? Before you speak, find a friendly face in the audience. Look to them. People look all around trying to find it and start the whole process. So in this particular case, you notice what happens. We're locking on one person. When we lock on one person, everything else kind of fades away. So all of our attention is just on that one, and our brain isn't having to make these new calculations all the time, trying to do this new threat calculation, trying to figure out how to get cranked up. Everything kind of fades away.
This is showing 5 seconds, and in our corporate training classes, this is an exercise we do. We have people actually get up and speak, tell a story about a communication experience, a vacation, whatever, but they get up to speak and they have to hold eye contact with members of their group for 5 seconds before moving on, or a minimum of 5 seconds. And it's a great exercise for people to do, because if you are like most people, you're used to holding eye contact for no more than 1 second. So it's like this, lock. When you lock on somebody, when you have a clear target, it allows you to clear your brain of all the other things other than that person to whom you're speaking. It's a matter of keeping track of a lot less information. And then, when you do lock on one person, it facilitates conversation that audiences look to today in terms of having a believable presentation experience. What people appreciate today is they want to know you as a person. They come to hear you speak because they want to hear what you have to say about your topic. John Kennedy was a very significant person in the speaking world because he was really the bridge. He was the bridge from the old style, the old oratory style, to the new humanistic style. In fact, that's what Kennedy brought to the whole process. Kennedy was the first president who was actually human. Well, he was. He would, at press conferences, you never know. Somebody ask a question, he'd crack a joke. Well, presidents didn't joke before then. That wasn't part of it, you had to maintain a certain stature. You were the president of the United States, and Jack Kennedy brought being human into the whole process of speaking. Tell me this, who would you most want to emulate when you get up in front of the room? Somebody give me a name. Who do you most want to be like speaking to a group? Bill Clinton? Hear that? Actually, there's only one right answer here. Yourself. Our method is different from what most people have heard elsewhere because it focuses on one thing, and that is on simply being you. I ask a lot of my classes, I say, okay, if you could be anybody, when you get up in front of a group, who would you most like to emulate? Who do you most want to be like? And I get names, you get Bill Clinton, and I say, well, actually, there's only one right answer, and that's you.
The person that people have come to see is you. We get calls all the time. People say, well, listen, I want you to work with the CEO because he needs help with presentation skills, but I got to tell you, what he really needs help with is his accent. And this accent might be a Brooklyn accent. Obviously, in today's diversified culture, we have people from all over the world. What we show them is, again, being a great speaker is learning how to be comfortable being you. It's the human input that you attach to the facts that you're trying to present that get people involved. And the only way they get involved is when they know you're being sincere.